อ อ อ Ovči provata, že?
Provata.
Provata.
έτσι πληρωθήκανε μαύρο καθάρι το να παραδείγουν πολλά μαύρο. Δεν είναι βέβαια σαν τα φιναρά, είναι
Anna Petrochilus was the most famous Greek speleologist. So here we are in the first Petrochilus. This room here for the electricity, like a fridge, cheese, wine, and everything. Because this stalactite looks like the musical instrument, the organ. The different colors, it's because are made from different minerals. The red and the orange are like here or here, are made by iron. And the gray are made by magnesium. And that's what's shining here. It looks like a diamond. Like a diamond are crystals from calcium carbonate. This phase.